Also, I'm just going to give him. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Tech Town Hall with Mayor Suarez. He's just getting set up, and we're going to give him one quick minute. So while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and give us a quick intro. My name is Elle Collish, and I'm joined today by Republican Mayor Francis Suarez, as well as fellow Gen Z GOP Executive Director John Olds. Let me begin by thanking every single one of you and the audience members for participating in tonight's programming. We at Gen Z GOP are so happy to have you with us. To learn more about our organization and be a part of our young adult conservative movement, be sure to check us out at genzgop.org. There, you'll learn more about our founding, our mission, our policies, our leadership, and even our social media platforms. And now, without further ado, let's start by introducing our guests and moderators. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Mayor Suarez on screen with us right there. So hailing from Miami, Florida, we have Mayor Francis Suarez. Prior to being elected with 86% support of Miami residents in 2017, the former attorney served as Miami Commissioner for District 4 for 8 years. He's now married to his wife, Gloria, and father to 2 beautiful children. Mayor Suarez considers it a great honor and blessing to be able to raise their family in the city of Miami. Thank you for being with us tonight, Mayor Suarez.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with both of you and all of you.
Well, thank you. So now I'm just going to give a quick intro for John. So John Old serves as our Executive Director for Gen Z GOP, and John is coming at us live tonight from Washington, D.C. John is a conservative activist and a senior at George Washington University, where he majors in economics and political science.
And now for Elle, really quickly. Thank you for the introduction. Elle Collish serves as the Gen Z GOP Vice President of Communications and National Spokeswoman. She hails from Antioch, Illinois, at the Illinois-Wisconsin border, and is currently a senior at American University's School of International Service in Washington, D.C., where she's specializing in global health and data science. So we have a lot for you, a lot in store for you tonight, and we're going to kick off this evening with some questions from for Mayor Suarez from our leadership team here. And then we'll kind of pivot to some questions from our members. And we're going to be talking all about tech, job investment in this burgeoning sector, something that the mayor has been a real leader on. So Mayor Suarez, just to begin, can you give us an overview of the approach that you've been taking to technology and sort of set the scene for us?
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for the opportunity to be with you. It's a wonderful opportunity and it's exciting. For me, I was the first generation, and I'm 43 now. I know I look a lot younger, but I was the first generation that grew up with a personal computer, with a home computer, laptops, cell phones. And so, it was very apparent to me, and I'm a relatively young elected official of a major city that, and I've been an elected official now for 11 years, believe it or not. It was very apparent to me that for a city to thrive, it had to continue to grow its tech ecosystem. The reason why is because whether we like tech, whether we don't like tech, no matter what you look at it from an ideological perspective, and there's a variety of nuances and issues that involve tech, the bottom line is that our world is inundated by technology, and that only is going to get more dramatic. And if we want to build a city that responds to opportunities for people in my generation, people in my children's generation, and people in my unborn grandchildren's generation, then what we should be doing in our city and in every city in America and in the world is fighting to grow that ecosystem within your city. So it's been really a 11-year project for me since I started as an elected official. We've been making strategic investments in a variety of different programs to grow the ecosystem, but it definitely got a lightning in the bottle moment when a few months ago, one of the members of the Founders Fund, Delian, tweeted out, "What if we were to bring Silicon Valley to Miami?" And I tweeted, "How can I help?" And that just ignited a firestorm of interest of people coming to Miami and trying to see what is this Miami tech ecosystem all about. And I think it became what I call FlyMo, which is sort of a flywheel plus fear of missing out, FOMO, where the combination of the two things from not only Silicon Valley, but from New York has created a very dense, quickly dense, and deeply penetrated venture capital and private equity and hedge fund capital market here in Miami with founders that are the envy of the world. And frankly, I think from a sort of GOP perspective, if you will, what we need to think about is, when my parents came from Cuba. Cuba is a communist country. And what happened in Cuba and what happened in Venezuela and what's happening in Nicaragua and unfortunately, so many countries in the world is we get sold on this idea, this false idea that if government just takes over everything, the government can just redistribute what we all have and we can just, create quote unquote equality. And the only thing that communism and socialism have ever created in the history of humanity that's equal is equal misery. And so we're starting to see in these high tax states and high tax cities, we're starting to see, people have choices. They don't have to live in places where they have to work 6 months out of the year just to get out from working for government. So I think, I think we're starting to see people reflect those choices. And when you have elected officials that don't care about the creative class in their community and simply ignore them or worse, insult them and tax them to death, they're going to move to areas where those things aren't happening. And it's easier than ever now in the midst of a pandemic because of remote work and because our city has been open.
Yeah, absolutely. So for all of you guys watching, Miami is actually one of the fastest growing cities. And so that kind of brings me into our next question is, what do you think the biggest thing state and local government can do to prepare for the future of technology?
Well, I think what state government can do is we need to be on the forefront of cutting edge technology. And I think one of the things that I'm working on with a couple of state legislators is making sure that our digital asset law, crypto laws are.
Hold on a second. I think that we lost him. We're just going to give him one quick second. That's all right. It just says that your mic is disconnected.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I can't hear you, but you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, I can't hear you guys, but that's 50% of the battle. At least you can hear me. Let's see if maybe we put this up.
We're reenacting a Verizon commercial really quickly.
One of the things we're trying to do at the state level is we're trying to have the most crypto-friendly digital asset laws. And so I think Wyoming, believe it or not, is the state that has the most crypto-friendly laws. And we're working with a state representative and state senator to try to implement the most crypto-friendly laws here. At the local level, I just announced last week, we just passed at the commission meeting 3 initiatives. One of them is allowing our employees to get paid a percentage of their salary in Bitcoin. Secondly, allowing our residents to pay for fees and taxes potentially in Bitcoin. And then the third is exploring the possibility of holding Bitcoin as part of our asset class. So, those are things that I think, again, put us on the forefront of what it is to be a technological organization. And I think it's gotten us a tremendous amount of good publicity.
Yeah, so I guess I kind of want to ask you about that. Oh, all right, guys, we're just going to give him.
You guys maybe on mute?
Second.
Check. No, you guys are good. I don't know why. I can't hear you guys.
Oh, hold on.
Stand by.
I couldn't plug you.
How about now? Can you hear us now? We can't hear you now.
No, we can't hear you.
You can hear me now. Oh, you can.
Yes, we can hear you now. We can hear you.
But I can't hear you.
Oh, no.
No, that's not the issue. They can hear me. I can't hear them. Maybe we should sign off and sign back in and see if that works.
Okay.
You think?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you want to give that a try, I'll just remove you really quick. Let's
So, Elle, I
see.
think it's really interesting what the mayor was talking about, how, we as conservatives, we always talk about how technology is sort of this like monolithic thing, right? It only gets talked about in the context of censorship versus no censorship. And I think what the mayor has sort of done in his city is sort of take the benefits of being a Republican, that sort of free market spirit, and combine that with, the opportunities of technology. And I don't know, what do you think of that?
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's something, I don't think of. I think like our generation too, we talk about Bitcoin and like everything that we heard, a few weeks ago with like GameStop stock and like all of that stuff. That I feel like almost the conversation has been so normalized to it being for young people. And so kind of seeing it get involved in government is really, really interesting, but it's also a big moment for us. I think it's in the sense of, as conservatives, we definitely have our own issues with big tech companies and social media. But just because we have those issues, it doesn't necessarily mean that tech and social media is going away. And so I think it's interesting to hear, from a GOP perspective about how to kind of weave that into local governance and get ahead of that curve. And so that's something that Miami and Mayor Suarez does really well, is identifying that tech is up and coming. And so we can either prepare for it now and use it to make us better, or we can be kind of behind and confused once it happens. And so I think that as we move forward, getting technology and high paying tech jobs and all of these things involved in local economies is really, really important. And seeing that kind of be tested in a city like Miami is really cool to see.
Yeah, one of the things I hope we get his audio sorted out. Seems like he couldn't hear us, but we could hear him. But regardless, one of the things that I want to talk to him about is sort of like the job training programs that would be necessary in the meantime, because we know our economy is ever changing. But one of the things is that there's sort of a skills gap that might be needed to fill in order to get to that. Those new jobs of the future. I know that you've talked a lot about that from the Midwest perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing. And so I was talking about it with some friends, and we were talking about this event and how excited I was with saying, my school offered something called Tech Campus. And so what Tech Campus allowed for us to do was we were able to kind of take classes at our local community college that were tech-based, whether that be machine learning or different things like that. And that was probably one of the best things that my high school ever did in terms of trying to get kids into high-paying jobs was, you don't have to go that traditional college route. Like, hey, what if you join up in the tech sector? And so that's kind of, something that we should look for too, is kind of how can we bridge that skills gap and how can we start it early? Because, some of these jobs, although they require a lot of training, don't necessarily require a college degree. And so it's a big opportunity for us, in middle America to kind of be able to segue. Hi, Mayor Suarez, can you hear us now?
I hear you.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
What happened there? All good.
So,
Technical,
it's
those trolls.
Hey, it's a tech town hall.
I have a question for you. How do we prevent Zoom microphones from going just completely to crap in the middle of meetings? How can you solve this for us?
It's funny. I've when I got COVID, I did from COVID till today, which was March 13th. I think I've done about 270, maybe 290 national interviews, and everything that you can possibly think of that I could possibly go wrong has gone wrong at one point or another in the middle of a national interview. So kids banging on the door, just everything that you can think of. So I think the best that you can hope for is I think the beauty of it is people have come to sort of expect glitches, and that's kind of like the normal program. If there is one without a glitch, it's like, wait, something's going on there. But that's the good news, is that we've become more ubiquitous. We have the ability to be anywhere. The bad news is we've become accustomed to, and we've had to become accustomed to the glitchiness of it sometimes. But yeah, it's all good. Thanks.
So on that note, yeah, no, I'm happy we got it all sorted out. But I guess my next question for you is, we talk about technology from the perspective of sort of on the policy landscape of, it's this thing that censors conservatives, and that's sort of how we talk about it in the public discourse. What do you say to your fellow Republicans and fellow conservatives about drawing a more nuanced approach to tech?
Well, I would say to them, first of all, that irrespective of what party you're from, tech is here to stay, and it's a force. And you can, pretend like it doesn't exist. You can try to regulate it out of existence, but it's not going anywhere. So you might as well find a way to work through it. I think the normal Republican principles are, when something is problematic, a private company, you compete with it, right? You create a competitive platform that, that can create a different voice. I think the other thing is that when you're the president of the United States or any high level elected official, you can get media coverage. So if one platform deplatforms you, that's a long debate, right? Then you still have the ability to call a press conference. Every single, particularly if you're the president, every single news station will be there. That's for sure. And you have the ability to communicate directly with people. And I think that's important. The whole deplatforming debate is such a long debate about, private companies and the ability for a private company to make decisions, because they're deplatforming people all the time. I mean, this is them deplatforming the president was not the first time that someone was deplatformed. I mean, they're constantly deplatforming people for use of policy violations every single day. Talk about the trolls that we were talking about. You know what I mean? People are being deplatformed constantly. So, it just was the most high profile deplatforming. So that's what created, I think, a lot of controversy. And then I think some of the things that the inconsistencies were, one person's deplatformed, but other people that have done things that are reprehensible are not deplatformed. And I think that's a concern that people have, which is rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you have to say back to those people that can't necessarily tell the difference between deplatforming and censorship, but also the opportunity for job investment? So maybe with your own constituents that were upset with kind of what happened, around the election and all of that, how do you kind of look at them and say, yes, you're right to be angry about this, but also you should be excited about, the potential for our town? How do you walk that balance?
The way I walk it is I create an emotional connection, right? And I think the emotional connection is, do you want your kids to be going to school somewhere away from our city? Do you want your kids to be leaving and working for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years and having to visit your grandkids in another city? Is that what you want? Or do you want your kids to be able to study here in Miami, get good high paying jobs and provide for their families? If the answer to that question is yes, then unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, the only route to that right now is technology, because technology has infiltrated every single thing that we do, every single industry. It's a subcomponent of every industry. And the way industries are growing and are metamorphosizing is through the use of technology. So we have to get in that game. There's just no other way.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree. So let's kind of move on and start talking about that in a sense. So speaking of ethics, what, in your opinion, are some of the lines in the sand that need to be in place when regulating the tech sector?
I think from my perspective, the party of Republican Party has typically been a deregulation party, right? We've been a party of, I don't want to say necessarily always libertarian, but we're kind of like letting people do what they want to do. So we've never been a party of excessive regulation. We've always been a party of deregulation. And that's what we should be, is continue to be a party that respects private property rights, that respects competition. Now, when somebody's a monopoly, we also need to understand that, there are moments when government has to step in to create and maintain a competitive environment. So I think that's the delicate balance. And I think that's what the conversation should revolve around.
Yes, absolutely. I entirely agree. John, do you want to take us to our next question?
I do, yeah. So I follow you on Twitter, and you've been meeting with all these different CEOs from Silicon Valley and California predominantly, it seems like. If you could just share with us, not necessarily any specifics, but what specific innovations are you really, really excited about right now that's going on in America?
I think first, obviously, the cryptocurrency digital asset stuff. I think also in the case of Elon Musk that I've been communicating with, boring tunnels, which is something that we've been talking about. I just met with an electric vehicle company today that is creating some electric vehicles that are totally revolutionary in terms of the way that they, I think it's called Canoe is the name of the, is it Canoe? So look them up. Really coming out online with some stuff that'll be hitting the market next year. It really revolutionizes the way that cars are made. So I think those are some of the ones that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I have a question about this specifically. We talk a lot about how tech comes with high-paying jobs and, potential for us to have investment and really jumpstart, Miami's economy and the United States economy. So I guess my question there is, what is Miami doing right now, or what do you plan to do to kind of bridge that skills gap so we can get those everyday people in those high-paying jobs?
I would say a few things. One is, we have a reputational issue that we have to deal with, which rightfully or wrongfully, this idea that Miami is only just sort of a sun and fun place and not necessarily a place where you can get a serious education and create a serious job. And I think we're doing that better and better every day, certainly since we've had this tech push. And I think part of it is us telling our story better. Most people don't know that Florida International University, where I went to school, graduates the most African-American and Hispanic engineers in the country, and it's top 20 in the nation for patents. That's just something that people didn't know. So I think we have to tell our story better. I think the other part of it is we have to consider doing some strategic partnerships with with schools that do have a tremendous name brand like MIT and Harvard and Stanford, and, consider borrowing that cachet to some extent so that we can get that reputational issue. And then I think the third thing we have to do is vocational training. We have to make sure that organizations like WinCode, which allow for adults to learn coding, are properly supported so that people can transition from jobs that are less skilled to jobs that are more skilled and do it seamlessly.
Yeah, absolutely. So does Miami have any plans to kind of invest in those tech and vocational schools? And then if so, could you give us a little bit more detail on that?
We have been. We've been doing it not only in the vocational setting, but also in the high school setting too. I mean, if you look at my How Can I Help campaign that I started with the t-shirts, all the proceeds from the campaign are going to a public school called iTech Prep. And it's an inner city school in Little Haiti that teaches robotics and coding and programming to its students. So part of it is creating a level of excellence and making sure that the curriculum closely mirrors the jobs that are going to be available. And then I think the second part is continuing to invest in things like WinCode and other coding boot camps that help people go to work in areas where they're not as familiar with.
Yeah, awesome. And so I think, I was talking about this while you had your technical difficulties, but Tech Campus got introduced at my high school, and it was absolutely one of the best things that you could do for, I'm from Illinois and Wisconsin, and so that middle America was kind of connecting young people to those high-paying jobs. And so I guess our next question before we segue into our audience questions, what advice do you have for young people that are looking to get into the tech sector, that are, looking to kind of make that edge? What advice do you have for them as they prepare for this?
My advice would be twofold. One is consider a computer science degree. And then I would also say sprinkle that with some business classes, because I think you want to have the technical side of how technology works, and you want to understand the business side of how to make a business work and scale a business. If you have those two things, then I think you'll be very well prepared for a job in the technology world. You understand the tech side and you understand the business side.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, we're going to kind of segue into some member and audience questions. And so to kick us off, we have George Alderman here with us, and he's going to ask you a question as a current resident of Florida.
I like that.
Hey there. How's it going?
Hi, George. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here for this question. So I've got two questions, but I want to put what I think is kind of the more pressing one in my mind. I want to put that one out there first. So it's about stuff like Bitcoin and the internet, the stuff that everyone's talking about nowadays. So many of the biggest breakthroughs for technology over the last couple of decades, like satellite phones, the internet, and Bitcoin, were at their beginning used by very few people and oftentimes for illicit or illegal means. These technologies are now ubiquitous in society, and their use has revolutionized the world for the better, but their shadowy histories can't be denied. Do you think that there's a place today for the mainstream adoption of technologies that are currently being used for illicit or illegal means, like the beginning of Bitcoin or the internet? What do you think of the idea of taking on their usage in order to make them more mainstream and thus confer their potential benefits on more people?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's certainly an impediment to some public policymakers wanting to adopt Bitcoin at a broader level, sort of its reputation. In the case of the internet, for example, it was really a military application that ultimately created the internet. And then it allowed it to continue to grow beyond the scope of military use. So I think I understand why Bitcoin developed the way that it did, because to develop a currency, it's very, very difficult. You have to, as a society, you have to decide this digital asset, whatever it is, Now we gave it a name. It's called Bitcoin. This thing has value. And then you have to establish the value. You have to establish a market, right? So it wasn't going to be established by people just going out and buying pizzas with Bitcoins for each other, right? Like the first supposed Bitcoin transaction, right? It was going to be established through a market. And oftentimes its ubiquity, right, that you talk about is established through, let's call it black market transactions, as opposed to sort of illicit transactions.
Oh no, we lost his mic again. That's okay.
Can you
Mayor
unmute?
Suarez, if you can hear us, we lost your mic one more time. Let me see if I can unmute you. You guys, it's just really fitting that we're having a tech town hall and just having technical difficulties. I feel like it's just like an encompassment of
All right,
like
let's see if we got me again.
Yeah, we got
There you
you.
go.
Can
All right,
hear
sorry.
us? No, you're so good.
Serious technical difficulties today. I think the trolls are different kinds of trolls. I think they're like some sort of
Animal spirits.
Yeah,
exactly,
now I can't hear you guys. So, all right,
Oh,
I'll just try to finish your question, George, and then I guess I'll log off and log back on again. But yes, I think in the case of Bitcoin, in order to establish a currency that was ubiquitous, it was being used in the black market, because otherwise you would just trade in normal currencies. Now what's interesting is it's becoming so mainstream that major money managers are using it as a hedge against the dollar. And so now the big concern or the big argument is, well, this is something that weakens the dollar. And my counter to that is, no, Bitcoin doesn't weaken the dollar. Bad fiscal policy, bad monetary policy weakens the dollar. It just so happens that people now have an alternative to the dollar, which they wouldn't have otherwise, or maybe they would have traded into another currency of a different country. And I think the fact that it's finite, the fact that it doesn't have central bank control, that it cannot be manipulated, is something that is very appealing to a lot of people. So it'll be interesting to see. There's public policy ramifications to that as well. That'll be very, very interesting to see. I'll jump off and then jump back on to see if we can get I don't know why this is happening. Maybe it's a time thing or something.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Thank you for the question, George. It's a great question.
All right. So George is going to stay on and ask our mayor one more question. We're going to give him a few minutes or a few seconds to kind of get back on. But George, as an audience member, what have your thoughts been so far?
This has been really great. I've been following Mayor Suarez for a while on Twitter, just partially because I'm from South Florida, Broward County, so not really Miami, but my mom grew up in Miami, so I feel very strong connection to that area. And hearing the idea of Miami and Miami-Dade County, that whole, really just all of South Florida as a result, being made into potentially the next Silicon Valley, the next place for financial tech. That's really exciting, and hearing this sort of leadership from the city is fantastic.
Thank you, George. I think it's a great question, by the way, on Bitcoin.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so George has one more question for you. Go ahead, take it away. All
right. So I'm from South Florida myself. I'm from Hollywood, so about 30 minutes outside Miami, depending on traffic, But when I talk to other South Floridians about the potential of our area becoming a burgeoning new hub for tech, a response that I hear often is an expression of worry over the idea of too much growth in the region. I'm very excited about the prospect of Miami emerging as a new spot for tech, but I'm also sympathetic to these concerns. How do you think these two factors can be reconciled? Can the growth of Miami's tech sector also present solutions to issues of sustainable growth and even issues of resilience?
I think it can. And I'll tell you this, this tech boom, if you will, which let's say began in earnest, this J-curve moment in December of last year, we were sustaining incredible growth, double-digit growth. I mean, my first year as mayor, we grew 8.5%. My second year, we grew 10.5%. And this year in a pandemic, we grew 6.5%. So this notion of growth, Miami was growing simply because it's a great city. It has low taxes. It has amazing weather. It's very well positioned in terms of its geo-positioning, close to South America, a gateway to the Americas, connected to Europe and Asia and the Middle East. So, to me, the tech thing is not about growing in terms of amount of people. I don't think it's going to be like a flood of actual people that are coming. I think it's more about the quality of people that are coming, the amount of capital that's going to allow people like you, George, who live down here. And when you build a company, you're going to have the ability to scale your company. You're not going to have to go to San Francisco. You're not going to have to go to LA. You're not going to have to go to New York to find a way to grow your company. You can do it from home. And I think your parents will appreciate that, because as you get older and you start a family, your parents are going to want to see you, and they're going to want to see your kids. And I think that what's happened for too many years in my generation is, people left and haven't been able to come back.
Well, that's a great answer, George. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you can will continue with your comments in the comment section. So with that being said, we're going to bring on our next guest, who is a current member of Gen Z GOP, Connor Gibson, to ask a question. Hi, Connor.
Hey, Ely. Hey, Mayor. Thank you for being here.
Connor.
I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be talking with you. My question is about social media. So obviously, as a Republican, we want to support private businesses and reduce regulations while also supporting the First Amendment and preventing censorship. How do we balance the two? How can we find a solution to, per se, respect private businesses and have the government stay out of business while preventing censorship?
Yeah, and I think it goes to how you define censorship. First of all, censorship has always been defined historically as government's control over what you say, right? That's how censorship has typically been defined. I think in this argument, this definition of censorship has changed to almost like you're on a private platform and the private person tells you you can't say that, and that's censorship. And that's a little bit concerning to me. And I'll tell you why. If we're at your house and I say something that you don't like, you have every right to tell me you can't say that here and you got to go. Right. I can't tell you, no, I can't say that here. You're censoring me. No, I'm not censoring you. I'm not the government, man. This is my house. If you want to act like a fool, I don't want you here. And by the way, it's up to me to define what acting like a fool is. You know what I mean? It's not up to you who are in my house. So that's the sort of analogy that I come up with. It gets even more complex when you have actors that are saying things and doing things that the platform, which is a private company, believes potentially may cause harm to others, right? That becomes very, very complex for the platform because now you're inside. Let's just keep the analogy. I'm in your house. I'm yelling, fire, fire, fire. And I could hurt people who are in your house when there isn't a fire, you know what I mean? And then so that it could create a liability for you if you don't do anything about it, right? If you just hear me yelling and there's no fire, I'm making it up. So that creates another dynamic that's a problem. I think the real concern is not so much about censorship per se. I think it's more about fairness, right? And I think the issue is like, well, now let's go back to your house, right? If somebody who happens to be of a different political party than you says something you don't like, you kick that person out. But if the person who is from your political party says something outrageous or equally outrageous, you don't kick that person out, right? So it becomes almost like a fairness issue. And I've heard one of the best arguments that I've heard on this whole platform thing is, look, if you're a private company, you should have very, very defined standards as to what is out of bounds, and you should apply those universally. So if Fidel Castro, who's dead, but if Raul Castro or whatever says something, that incites violence, then he should be deplatformed as well. Right. And I think that's part of the concern that there are some very, very bad actors that have platforms that have not been deplatformed. And an American president, whether you like him or not, was deplatformed. So that's a very serious thing. I also think that we've got to, we see it now. Listen, the news, for example, has been liberal for decades, right? For lifetimes. The news has always been sort of liberal, left-leaning. At least that's a perception. Now, in the last 5-10 years, you've had options. If you're Republican, conservative, you can at least look at 3 other stations that will give you a different perspective. I actually think that, going forward, we've got to find a way to de-channelize our society, because what's happening is if you're Republican, you watch these stations. If you're Democrat, you watch these stations, and it creates a wedge where we're not focusing on trying to find out the truth. We're just trying to hear a particular version of the truth or a particular spin on the truth, and that's a problem. And I think, frankly, social media And I think one of the reasons why it's important for an elected official to have a platform, right, their own platform, is because, I often say, if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell your story, and you're not going to like their version of the story. So I'm very proud, and I'm zealous about my growing platform in social media. People often tell me, "Oh, how come you're so worried about your the number of impressions that you get on your tweets or the number?" And I said, you know why I'm worried about that? Because that's the voice that I have.
Right.
For me as a public official, my voice and my ability to get my message out there is critical. And we've allowed the good thing that these platforms have done is they've allowed most public officials to have a voice that in some cases is even greater than the voice that the press has, that the media has. The reach is even greater, right? So I can put out a tweet, and just to use as an example, I'm not trying to pick on anybody in particular, but I can put out a tweet. I have, I think, 75 or 76,000 Twitter followers right now, something like that, and about 78 and 79,000 Instagram followers. And all the reporters in Miami have 1/7 that. So they put out a tweet, and 10,000 people or 15,000 people might see it. So I actually have the ability to communicate with 7 times more people than a reporter in my city. And that's very powerful because they don't define me then. I define myself. I can define who I am. I can define what I stand for. I can define the good that I do. You don't have to hear about me through someone else and their version of me, right? I can tell you who I am. I can tell you why I did what I did. I can tell you, you know what I mean, why this is important for me. And what happens is in the media, sometimes 80-90% of what you hear about politicians is negative. And let me tell you something, that's not who we are. I can tell you that right now. I mean, we do boneheaded things like everybody else. We make mistakes like everybody else. We're human beings, we're flawed. But 90% of what we do is an attempt to do good, right? At least it should be. And so when we're doing good, it's not like the coverage doesn't reflect that. I don't get an article every day like, hey, Mayor Suarez is so phenomenal, he did this today. That doesn't happen. Those articles don't happen. I've had weeks where I've done these amazing things that I never even thought possible. And the best thing is I'll get sort of a semi-positive, slightly better than neutral article, and so you have to be able to have your voice. At the same time, I understand that if I were to say something irresponsible, I could get deplatformed, so I know that. I mean, I'm conscientious of that. And I don't think it's something that would happen unless it's extreme circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Connor, thank you for joining us. We hope you kind of stick around in the comment section.
Great question.
All right, now we're going to move on to some of our comment section questions and some of the questions that we've gotten via Twitter. So if you guys just joined us, just a reminder that if you want to ask the mayor a question, use the hashtag GenZGOP Town Hall, or just go ahead and throw it there in that comment section, and I'll be sure to write it down. With that, John, go ahead and take it away.
All right, this question comes from Dalen. And the question is, Miami PD has a great presence on social media, which helps them bridge the gap between the community they serve, including communities of color, and the department. I'm a big fan of the Instagram page. How has the use of those tech platforms helped the city build trust between the community and the department?
I think it's critical. I think, we just came out from under a Justice Department consent decree that we had for many, many years. And I think, communicating with the public takes on a variety of different forms. And I think social media is one that sort of demystifies, if you will, the process a bit for that police resident interaction. It humanizes our police officers, which is important, and it connects them to our residents. They have an awesome social media platform. They do a great job with it. And I'm really proud of what they do.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so that's going to lead us into this kind of next question here. And it comes from Ashton Wilcox, who's currently one of our members. And he asks, how has your relationship with Governor DeSantis been around tech, especially with his recent actions in relation to tech?
I think the governor has his perspective, and I have mine. I think that there's, two public officials are not always going to agree on everything all the time, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying I disagree with him or I agree with him. I'm just saying he has a particular perspective, and I have, my own perspective on it. I think it's a very positive thing, and I think it's something that we should nurture and we should seize this opportunity. I think there are opportunities for him and I to work together on some things that I think will be beneficial to Floridians and to Miamians. And that's what I always look to do. I always look to find commonality instead of, figuring out, things that we don't agree on.
Yeah, absolutely. John, go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of we've mentioned Ron DeSantis, and this sort of brings us to the sort of final topic that I wanted to discuss with you tonight, and that is the future of our party. And I think it's pretty clear that there's a lot of subject matter there. Let's put it that way. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, coming from such a diverse city, Republicans really gained a lot of ground with diverse voters in 2020. And I wanted to hear from you on how you think we should attempt to build on that going forward.
Well, I think the president, to his credit, spent a lot of time in South Florida, listened to a lot of the concerns of the Hispanic community in particular, and built his platform and made decisions on the basis of what were the issues that they cared about. So, I mean, that's just sort of politics 101. You listen to your constituents, and you do things that they are asking you to do, as long as they're the right things to do. So I don't think there's any magic to that. I think in terms of growing, I think we have to look at, obviously a variety of different issues that I think are important to hopefully resolve in the next few years. Tax policy is important. Having a balanced budget should be important. Immigration has to be solved. That's an issue that has to be dealt with. And so I think, as we look to, go beyond and grow, every generation wants to grow. We have to make sure that the policies that we're implementing and discussing are policies that grow the party and particularly speak to our generation, like climate being another one, where I think, we need to protect our environment and make sure that we have a Miami and a state that's here, not just for my generation, but for your generation and for, our children's generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my next question, on this topic is to the next generation. Oh, I'm not sure if you can hear us again. It did that little thing. That's okay.
Let's see. Are we back on?
I can hear you.
Did it work? But now I can't hear you. So
Okay,
that's what's happening here.
One more time. Let's see. All right. I'll come right back. But thank you, all of you, for, joining in this last couple of minutes. We're going to kind of start wrapping it up here. But this has been a really interesting conversation. And we kind of talked about a slew of topics, from censorship and what that means, whether that's coming from the government or coming from, a big tech company. We also talked about job investment and potential for, higher paying jobs, especially in a city like Miami, that kind of brings in growth. And then after that, we talked about the ability to be able to connect that job growth to people that need it, and how to get them the education that they need, and how to get them the resources they need to be able to take advantage of that. And we talked about cryptocurrency, how Miami is planning to use it, what the future for it is, and especially what the current reputation of it is. So this has been an all-encompassing conversation about tech that we are really, really lucky to be able to have with Mayor Suarez. Being able to end this conversation on some advice for the future of the party and some advice for the young people is really great, and what's really all of our organization is about. So I'm going to use this last couple of minutes just to plug our organization. And if you don't follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or like our Facebook page, please go and do that now. We have a series of these events coming up, and we'd love to have keeping you around. We want to hear your voices, and we want to make sure that Gen Z is completely represented in our organization. And that means we need you to join.
Yeah, I think that we mentioned it earlier, the sort of irony of having technical difficulties on our tech town hall. Oh, we have him back. Yay.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm back.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
It's ironic. We were having technical difficulties on the tech roundup, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I apologize. We've been using this platform for past events. We've never had an issue. So
could be on my end.
It's part of a one-off. Oh no, certainly not.
You could never be in the wrong. Continue.
No, it's deny and deflect, right? That's the political way, right?
Exactly.
But
so there's our.
Yo, go ahead, Elle, please.
All right. No. So my next question to you is going to be, do you have any advice for young people, especially young people in the Republican Party that are currently taking a look at what our party looks like and the rhetoric that our party is touting, and are unsure about whether they want to join the GOP? Do you have any advice for us as we kind of embark on this journey of making a party that's worthy for our generation?
I think the best advice I could give is the Republican Party should stand for the principles that it's always stood for: less government, balancing our budget, strong on defense, strong on law enforcement and protecting people, less regulation, and those are the things, but I think it can evolve on things like climate and the environment, on a variety of other things and social things that I think, maybe government shouldn't be involved in. And so, I think that's what I would recommend. And I would say that, if you do join the Republican Party, that, it's joining any party or being affiliated with any organization, it should be a lifelong, opportunity to grow and to get better and stronger. I think sometimes we overemphasize, joining a particular club or joining a particular thought process. And I think we should continue to think about evolving as human beings and never do anything that dehumanizes us. I think politics has gotten to a point where we have taken away the humanity. Even, we may not agree or on everything, but like, you call them the trollers or whatever, some of the commenters who are obviously not putting their actual name on there. So first is, why wouldn't you put your name? If you want to comment on something, you should own up to your comments, your actual person. And then I think the second part is, why would you be so nasty? I mean, you can have a debate and you can disagree, and that's okay. We don't all have to agree, but we don't have to be insulting, and we don't, that just doesn't get you anywhere. That doesn't solve anything. I mean, in everything that I've been around my entire public career, I've never felt that insulting anybody or criticizing them or dehumanizing them has gotten me anywhere, frankly. I can have a policy difference with somebody. They feel X, I feel Y. It is what it is. I still like the person. I still think they're decent people. I still think they're good people. But once you start, dehumanizing people, once you start hiding your identity, it's in many ways, it's because you're probably ashamed of some of the things that you're saying, or you don't want to do them in public. And it's probably a good thing, particularly when they're things that are so, nasty.
So do you see that happening though? I mean, our politics has become so nasty. Do you have any hope that it might actually change?
I do. I actually do have a lot of hope. I do. And I think it's our generation's obligation to do that. I think we need to treat people with respect and kindness. I think we need to understand how to disagree without being disagreeable. I think that there's a perfectly good space for that. And by the way, you also should never think that you have an absolute, it's particularly in a debate, on public policy debates, you have an absolute ownership on the truth. It's very possible that in 5 years and 10 years, something comes up where you say, let me rethink this issue or how I feel on this issue. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, evolving based on personal experiences. Sometimes an issue becomes very personal to you because a person in your family goes through it in a certain way. And you think to yourself, you know what, maybe I'm going to think differently about this issue. It happens all the time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think for our society to heal, for our politics to get better, I think we need to get better at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question, I kind of goes along differently like this, but something that's going to be really important for our generation. Like you said, that you were one of the first people or first generations to grow up with a personal computer. We're the first generation to grow up with social media every single day. We live our lives on social media, it's out there, and we're seeing kind of a rise in what's being referred to on the internet as cancel culture. And people not being able to make mistakes or saying something and then having it come back to haunt them years later. So as we have this conversation about social media and as we have the conversation about tech, can you give us some of your feelings on cancel culture and how that's going to look for our generation and ways that we can start to kind of use tech and social media to help us and not hurt us?
It's a really tough thing. We live in a world where it's hard to make a mistake. It really is. And when you're a politician, you're elected official who's constantly talking, you know, and you're constantly tweeting, and you're constantly, it's always, you know, very difficult. And we live up to this impossible standard that we have to be perfect, which is just not doable. And I think we need to all understand that we're not perfect. We can make mistakes. We should be able to own up to those mistakes and be able to move on from those mistakes. And we need to draw a distinction between a mistake that is, you know, something you said that you shouldn't have said, or that maybe you didn't think right, or maybe understanding that maybe we do have implicit biases that we're not even aware of, and that we can get better at. But I think, you know, I think that's definitely something that we need to improve on as a society.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, you guys. I'm going to wrap up our broadcast. So one last time, if you aren't following us on Instagram and Facebook and on Twitter, give us a follow over at GenZGOP.org. It's on that spinny box there at the bottom. And we look forward to having you guys at our future events. And make sure to kind of DM us with any questions you have. With that being said, Mayor Suarez, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so grateful to be able to look up to a local leader like you that has such a depth of knowledge on tech. And so we hope to work with you again in the future.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you, John. I appreciate it. Thank you to all your viewers. Appreciate it.